है तो चैट पे जाना पड़ेगा, एडोबी पे जाना। हेलो, कोई रिस्पॉन्स नहीं आ रहा है।
आपको सुनाई नहीं देगा उनका रिस्पॉन्स?
उनका रिस्पॉन्स वो बोल नहीं रहे हैं, वो अपना चैट
Okay.
पे दे रहे हैं। हम उनका रिस्पॉन्स चैट पे देखेंगे। पूछ रहे हैं वी कैन हियर यू, ठीक है। आप अपना पीपीटी स्टार्ट। उनका रिस्पॉन्स देखना, आपको चैट पे जाना।
So Balendu, if everyone can hear, can we start then? Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, all of you. If you can hear me, then we are starting our session a little late. Professor Manke have asked me to take 10 sessions of your this course. So I will be trying to take care a part of it, which would essentially deal with information generation. All right. So when we talk about information generation, then we will be talking of research methodology that we adopt while trying to do it. So here, the first lecture would actually talk about that how do we carry out this process of information generation. So essentially, when I'm talking of information generation, we are essentially trying to understand that how on earth do we start, and the literatures from the past have talked about some essential steps which, if could be taken, then that would end up in giving us some better information output. So let us try to understand. I don't know, I cannot hear you, so if you have any questions, then I don't know, Balindu will have to tell me that they are asking some questions or not. I have to come to this screen time and again to check whether someone is asking question or not. All right, so I'm just starting. So from there, so now we will try to understand the information generation perspective of it and right into the context of research. So first of all, let us try to understand that what is this research which actually ends up in giving us some information. So literatures, behaviorists, researchers have tried to define research as a systematic and objective. So systematic and objective are two important words here. So now we will not be talking of something which is random, but it would be systematic, which means it would be following some system, some processes, some steps. It would be objective, which means it has something that it has to draw out of. So it's a systematic and objective identification, collection, analysis, dissemination, and use of information. So which means that we have to identify something. All right, identify something, which means when I'm talking of identification, it essentially means identification of the problem. All right, so suppose I'm sitting here and I'm just wondering that why on earth is it happening, and I want to have an information which essentially will tell me that this is why it is happening. So research would be an answer to it, and as a methodological part of it, I have to start from identifying the problem, because unless I do not have a problem, I would not be knowing what kind of information do I need to cater to this problem. So research starts from identification of the problem. All right, and pertaining to this problem, we talk of collection of data, we talk of collection of certain information, which in turn will help us in understanding what actually is the end result of it, or what actually we are coming up at. So then once we have this collection of data, then we will be doing analysis onto this data. There are certain tools and techniques which we talk of when we are talking of analysis. Now one point which is worth mentioning here is when we are talking of the second step, which is collection. Now the collection would essentially mean the collection of data. All right, and when we are talking of data, we are talking of data in its raw form, robust form. So essentially it does not tell us anything, so we have to convert it into something which we can call as information. So we are starting from identification, which is trying to find out what the problem is, and to cater to that problem we would be requiring certain amount of data. We will try to collect that data, and then we will be trying to analyze this data, and for this analysis we have certain tools, we have certain techniques that we will apply so that we can analyze this data. And as part of this analysis, we would be coming up at something which would be the interpretation of it, and that interpretation of this analysis is has to be disseminated. All right, And when we will disseminate this information which actually is result of our analysis, then this is information to you. And this information essentially is the answer to the problem from where we have started to. So if I have to rephrase my words, I will be talking of a problem, collection of data, then we will analyze that data, and that will give us some information, and that information is to be used as a solution to the problem which essentially I have arrived at. So I hope we are doing good now. I hope you can all listen to me. So I'm not saying anything onto this chat screen. Yeah, thank you Rajat, thank you, and Manjula and Rajat, both of you. I've got your response, so I can go ahead. So now when we were talking of this identification, collection, analysis, dissemination, use of information, now why on earth do we require this information? That essentially is so that I can improve my decision making. Alright, so this can relate to anything under the sun. Anything would mean anything, and that would essentially cater to the problem that you are trying to address to. So you can literally try to address any problem which you are trying to solve by means of research. And this decision making would actually help us in solving our problems and giving us some more opportunities and to understand the problem in a little bit more depth. So this is it. This is the research from the surface level, that how do we do it. So in today's talk we will try to understand that how do we go about it. So if I can go ahead, then I will be trying to understand, and we will be trying to talk about the role of research that it plays. So essentially, as we have started our talk from something which is as important as information, all right, so this is the ultimate thing that we would require anything. So this information that we require to solve any of our problem and to improve our decision making actually can pertain to all the holistic things which you can see in our environment. So what field you may talk of, you would have some customer groups, you would have some controllable variables, you would have some uncontrollable environmental factors. So essentially what I'm trying to put across is that this information is required about something which is in your hand, that is something that we call as controllable variables, about something which is uncontrollable, which is not actually in our hand. We will talk of economy, we will talk of technology, laws and regulations, social and cultural factors, political factors. So we would require information about everything. I mean, we are not living in an isolated world where we would just be looking at the road ahead but not bothered about what is happening by my sides. So I would need to know about what are the uncontrollable factors, the economy that I am working in, the technology era that I am regularly in, the laws and regulations of the country that you are trying to work out for, the social settings in which you are working, political factors, always influence whatever we do. So we would not be only requiring a simple information about our problem, but this information about our problem has to be in context of our uncontrollable and controllable variables. So essentially what we are trying to understand here is that it has to be holistic information that we are trying to reach at. And when we are talking of this information as a solution to a problem, this is when research comes into picture. So research essentially try to give us this information. So how does it do it? We have discussed it, just a quick view of it. So first of all, we assess the information need, that we require this information. Now suppose my business is not doing good. I would like to know that what is the problem. This is my problem statement, and for this problem statement I would be requiring some information. Information is my solution, and what would that information be, that why I'm not doing good. So this information would be provided to me by means of research, and this information would actually help me in try to make some decisions. So this is how research actually impacts the overall decision making capabilities of an individual, of an organization, of a group whole. All right, I hope we are done to this place. Any problems? Okay, Raja, thank you, got your response. So let's go ahead. So we are done with this. Now let's come to next slide. So then essentially literaturists have been talking about this research, and looking at the way that we have worked out this far, we would essentially realize that this research, whenever we are trying to do it, can broadly be classified into two parts. So one would be problem identification research, and second would be problem solving research. So I hope that at some point of time in your life, or while you were going through some research books, you must have come across the words like exploratory research or say descriptive research. So the very idea of having these two things are, because in research we always believe that the first most important point while we are trying to understand anything, or while we are trying to approach to any solution, would be to understand the problem in a wide screen which has to be crystal clear. So that would become, and that would invite another kind of research which would actually try to help us in understanding the problem minutely. And that leg of research we essentially call as problem identification research. The second part of it would then become problem solving research. So we will see in our next slides, essentially the output of problem identification research would be the problem identification, and this problem identification is given as a food to the problem solving research, because problem solving research essentially cannot be carried out unless we do not have a predefined problem in our hands. So that problem would be defined only after problem identification research has been carried out. So these two are seen as different broad forms of the research that we essentially talk about. So now going ahead, let us try to understand that what all steps do essentially we have to take in order to carry out this informational output that is nothing but is a solution to our problem. So these are the steps, 6 steps in all. So we will be trying to go through each of them. So let's try to have a look at them from the surface level. So essentially we will be starting it up with problem definition. We have touched upon it in the sense that it is very important, because unless we do not understand the problem, it will be like I do not know where I am going, but I have road before me. So second would be development of approach to the problem, a very important step. Then is research design formulation. We'll be talking of that, how do we go ahead about it. Field work or data collection, we will try to gather some data. That is essentially something what we have touched upon when we were trying to understand research in general, when we have talked about identification, collection, analysis of data. Then another part of it would be data preparation and analysis, wherein we would be trying to touch upon and understand that what do we mean by data preparation. And then in the end we will be trying to understand report and presentation. So how do we keep it formalized and how do we document it. So if I have to pickpocket some of these steps, which I would say rather are very important to understand, and if we do any casual approach in understanding those steps, our output would be a hue and cry. So if I have to name them, then they would be problem definition, research design formulation, and data analysis. So I would call them to be very, very important to understand, should never ever be overlooked. So I'm not saying that the other steps are not important, but we have to be very careful about when we are trying to deal with these kind of situations, when we are trying to identify the problem, when we are thinking of a research design that will go ahead, and when we are trying to understand what data analysis tools and technique would be dealing with. So these 3 steps, yes, obviously today we are trying to understand an overview of it. So the structure of our leftover 9 talks, I have kept it like that we will be trying to understand each of these steps, how do we do it. So which means that identification of problem that we will deal with today in some sense, and then when we are talking collection of data, to collect data we would be requiring some data collection instruments. So how to develop those instruments we will try to understand in our next talk. And once we have developed this instrument, we will collect the data, and once we have the data before us, then how do we analyze that data. So looking at the structure of this research methodology talk, we would be discussing some of the tools and techniques that we generally apply in order to analyze the data, that would give you a first hand outlook of the analysis that we generally do. So let's approach ahead. So first of all is problem definition. So problem definition, to understand it much better, I have tried to bundle together an example study which would actually let us know that how important is problem definition. As the name itself suggests, that defining a problem is not a very easy task to do, and we will come across to it when we will be trying to understand this example. Now suppose you as an executive research and you as an executive received a phone call from a research analyst who says that, see, I'm your friend and I'm working with XYZ company and I want you to help me in analyzing the data which I've collected for one of my projects which I'm carrying out in my company. So you said that, okay, let's meet across someday and we will sit together around the table, we will discuss it out, and then maybe I will be able to help you analyzing the data. So you met and he gave you the copy of questionnaire, and then he asked you and your opinions about that, how should I go ahead to analyze this data. So now the first question, as this is not an interactive session, otherwise I would have loved to ask you that what is the first question that you would ask whenever anyone approaches to you and says that this is the questionnaire, this is the data which I have fed it into, so I want you to analyze this data. So I would have loved to seek your opinions on that. What would you feel that what should be the first question that you would be asking to such an individual? So I'm just coming on to the point straight away. The first question would perhaps be, what is the problem being addressed? And why is this important? Now, this would become important because as we go ahead in our lecture series, we would see that a set of data which you have with you today in market, we have a lot of analysis software tools, like we have SPSS, like we have SAS. Now these softwares helps us in analyze data in multiple forms. So all I'm trying to say and bring home the point is that a set of data can be analyzed in different ways, which means, just trying to put it out in other words, that a set of data can be used to generate multiple informations. All right. So to give you an example, then I would talk about, suppose you have a questionnaire which measures the behavior of people about XYZ. Now the behavioral data that you've collected, now that perhaps can be analyzed in different forms, and hence it will generate the different information depending on the analysis that you are doing. So it becomes important. So when anyone comes to you, as is this example we are trying to discuss, that I want to analyze this data, so the very obvious question would be that what actually are you trying to get out of your data? Accordingly, I will decide that what tools would I be requiring to fetch out this information from this data. How should I go ahead about it? So this is the thing that you really need to know upfront, that what is the problem that you are trying to address. So when you ask this, if it is the case that if you look perplexed and if you could not explain that what was the actual problem that he was trying to address, then you actually have to say to him upfront that data analysis is not an independent exercise. And it's $1 million statement that the goal of data analysis is to provide information related to the problem components. All right. So the very fact that we were discussing, that one data set can be used to generate multiple informations, and hence I need to know what are your problem components, and only then I will try to have certain tools, certain techniques which essentially would try to give me those parts of the information only. Otherwise a data can be used for multiple informations. So you would have to be surprised that without clear understanding of research problem, one actually cannot go further, and it will be all void. All right. So everything has to be redone. It will be all raining if you do not know actually what is the problem, and many times it so happens, and I tell it to you by my personal experience, that when data is just collected by your gut feeling, that I feel that these are the questions that I think would be measuring this thing, and this actually would result into the so and so information. So if you do not know exactly what you are trying to catch upon minutely, then many a times it so happens that the data which you collected actually is not right for the kind of information that you are trying to get out of it. So this is important to understand, that what is your problem, and context of the problem is also important. All right. So this is this is something where we're trying to understand that problem has to be defined minutely, and people talk about these steps, that is how we can try to define the problem. So you would be trying to discuss with the decision makers that what actually can be the problem, though this is part of your exploratory research, wherein we are trying to do brainstorming, wherein we are trying to do group discussion, wherein we are trying to do the rapid fire round with the people. So suppose that your business is not doing good, so you would ask people, you would do brainstorm, you would do group discussions, you would do lot many things, from where you will have lot of list of the potential problems that could be there because of which business is not doing good. And you can interview the experts, you can go back into the previous studies which has been done. That is something that we call as secondary data. Then you can do qualitative research, all in the context of the environment. That is, if I have to take you back, then we will be talking of uncontrollable factors. So it all has to be in some context, and it is only then that you define the problem. All right, but not an easy step, but it seems to be easier. So I hope by now things are clear. Now, Vijendra, you're saying something? Okay, no, because I have seen no, so I was wondering that if you have something to ask. Okay, Manjula, thank you, Vijendra. So I hope I've got your responses. So Manjula is again typing. If I can have a look at it. Okay, thank you, Manjula. So let's go ahead. So this was our problem definition. So if you can remember the slide wherein we have talked of all the 6 steps starting from problem definition, and if you can also remember the important of these steps. So one of them was problem definition. So I hope that we are talking in line, and we all would be accepting that yes, it is very important to understand this problem as such. So second would be to develop an approach to the problem. Now this step would actually be an extension of understanding problem more minutely. So what do I mean by that? Essentially, it so happens that we always say that we should not hide anything from a lawyer and from a doctor. The same applies here. So if you are trying to go to a research department or a research agency, and if you ask them, okay guys, I have this problem and I want a solution to it. So which means that you have to tell them background of the story that you are trying to build up. All right, you have to tell them each and everything which relates to it, so that the problem can be understood clearly and they can develop an approach to it. So just to give you an example, now suppose you as a company, all right, now your sales are going down, right? So when your sales are going down, you set across and you try to discuss that what could be the problem. Now you do exploratory research and you try to find out that perhaps I have not updated my product vis-a-vis to my competitor's product, and hence I am losing sales to my competitors. Now suppose this is a problem, and now your research statement or your problem statement becomes, since my product is not doing good into the market and I'm losing to my competitors, I want to bring some changes to my product, and what those changes should be. Now this is my exact research problem. All right, so the research problem, I'm reiterating it again, is what changes should I do to my product so that it is accepted by the consumers. Now suppose this is my statement. Now if you go to a research agency, if you go to a research department and says that what changes should I bring to my product so that it can be sold in good amounts, telling him this only would not be enough. Now because there are many ways in which product can be changed, who knows that he will give you solution as a research analyst that would make your product too costlier and may not be accepted by the consumers. So you have to tell the context in which you are trying to bring changes in your product, which means that your sales were going down, your product was not doing good. So we found out that the product has to be changed, has to be brought some, there has to be some contemporariness brought into the product, and this is why I am trying to do it. So when I as a research analyst knows that this is why you want to do it, I would keep into the mind that the changes here are not meant to look the product fantastically well, but it is all about to make the product which can be actually accepted by the people or accepted by the consumers. So the context, the entire context of it has to be understood. So telling a research analyst just that I want to do some changes into my product, but those changes should be, would be a half problem defined if you do not tell him the background, why do you want to bring those changes, what is your ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve. So that is something that we mean by developing an approach to the problem. So just dig it more. You have a problem before you, just dig it more, get deep inside it, and try to understand that why on earth one is trying to do it, and why is this problem at the first place. So what is the solution that one is trying to cater to? So the solution here was not only to bring any change into the product, but it was all about to bring a change into the product which is vastly accepted by the consumer community. So this is all about developing an approach to the problem. So after that, we have this research design formulation, a very important stage, and very important because it is this stage where entire blueprint or framework of your research project is generated. So meaning thereby, when I'm talking of research design, I would be talking of each and every step that I would be executing in order to have the solution to my problem. So that starts from doing exploratory research, that starts from which kind of data should I look at, what tools of analysis should I be applying onto it, how should I be interpreting it, all that, every little thing that you can think of that you would be encountering when you're trying to execute this research project, that would actually encompass your research design. So to understand it a little more better, we have some classifications of it. You would have heard this term at some point of time. So when we're talking research design, we essentially talks of two major things. This is perhaps that we have already touched upon when we said that problem identification research and problem solving research. So when we're talking of problem identification research, we talk of exploratory research design. When we're talking of solving the problem, then we are talking of conclusive research design. So exploratory would be, as the word suggests, explore. I don't know what the problem is. I just know that okay, my sales are going down. What is the problem? I will just explore it. And explore would start from anything. I mean, I do not have an idea where do I have to approach to, what further work I have to do. I will just try to explore the things. It has a different way of doing. Conclusive research design would mean you have this problem in your hand, and now conclusively you know that this is what you have to find solution of. So conclusive design would essentially means to addressing a specific problem. That again is divided into two parts: descriptive research and causal research. Descriptive research would mean uh, just to describe the things, and causal research would mean cause and effect relationships. Now these two things becomes very important. Uh, in the sense, we have to understand the difference between these two. Now suppose there are times, I hope that many of you would have heard the term correlation. So there are times you take two data series and you do correlation test between them. Correlation coefficient, which is R, suppose it comes out to be non-zero, which will always come out. So it tells you that these two data series are related to each other. All right. Now that would become descriptive thing, but it is not a causal. So if there is a non-zero correlation between two data series, suppose X and Y, we would not say that X is because of Y or Y is because of X. So then we would be talking cause and effect relationship. It is because of this that Y is generated, or it is because of Y that X is generated. So that would become causal research. All right. We are not talking of causal research, but we are talking of descriptive research. Many times it so happens that just there is relationship between these two, but still they are not because of each other. All right. So this is something which is known as descriptive research, and this is the essential difference between these two. Most of the times we do descriptive research, it is divided into two parts: cross-sectional design and longitudinal design. So cross-sectional design is the design where we go to the respondent and ask questions only once. All right, we do not ask questions from the same respondent again. It is only once that a question is asked from respondent. Longitudinal design would mean to ask the question from the same respondent time and again. All right, so this is the longitudinal research design. So the kind of studies when you're trying to address the time effect of something, then you do longitudinal design. In cross-sectional design, you just have to ask someone once and that's it. Cross-sectional design again of two parts: cross-sectional single, cross-sectional multiple. So cross-sectional single would simply mean asking one individual only once. multiple cross-sectional would mean you just have to understand it a little bit. Asking one individual only once, but there is a context in which that question was asked. In the same context, we are asking the same question, but from the different respondents. Just to give an example, now suppose I am trying to understand how children visualize Cartoon Network. Alright, so when I say children, I would mean someone from 5 to say 15 years of age. Alright, so now I am sitting in 2012. So in 2012, I am asking from the children, what is your opinion about Cartoon Network? Suppose, for example, end of story, I've asked them, fine. Now I am sitting in 2032, which is 20 years ahead of now. And then if I want to know what is the opinion of children about Cartoon Network, alright, so then I will be trying to catch up those individuals who are between the age group of 5 to 15, but obviously these are not the same children from whom I have asked in 2012, because the children who was, or the child who was 10 years of age in 2012 has now become 30 years when I'm talking about 2032. So the context, which is the child group that I'm trying to study, is same in 2012 and in 2032. This context remains same, but the people changes, but the respondent changes, and that is what we do mean by multiple cross-sectional design. So you just have to remember it. Then we are talking cross-sectional, it means one respondent is only asked once, is not asked twice. In multiple cross-sectional design, we keep the context same, but then we change the respondents, and that is how we talk of multiple cross-sectional design. Right? So taking the discussion a little further, this is all about a broader picture of your research design. Though we have discussed about exploratory, conclusive, you discussed about cross-sectional, causal, and all that. Now that would just be a part of your this stage of research process. All right. So essentially, when I'm talking of this stage, I would be talking of each and everything as I've already discussed, and these designs would essentially be part of it. So right from the starting, with what kind of information I would be requiring to understand or to come to the solution of this problem. This is what I will be trying to pen down when I'm trying to process this stage of the research process. Then I would be trying to pen down also that what design is required to find out solution of this problem. Now suppose I have decided that I will be doing conclusive research. Then what sources of information would I be going to? Will it be a secondary resource that I would be requiring? Will it be primary data that I have to collect? Alright. So if I say that secondary data I would be requiring, I mean which secondary data you would be requiring? Will you be going to Indian Statistical Institutes? Would you be requiring some statistics? Would you be going back to some magazines? Would you be going back to some newspapers? Would you be going back to some white papers? Would you be going back to literature? So what secondary sources? Now that all is penned down. If it is a primary data collection, then you come to the next step, data collection instruments. Okay, if you want to collect this kind of data, which instruments would you use? When I'm talking of instruments, I'm talking of, will it be a questionnaire that you'll be giving to the respondents? Will it be an observational method of data collection? Will it be an online survey? Will it be a telephonic interview? Will it be a face-to-face interview? What instruments that you will use in order to collect this data, that is also penned down. Then the methods, and then you have to decide on how many people should I be approaching, and that I would be ensuring that is enough number of people to carry out this study. So I will be deciding on to sample, who will be the sample at the first place, and if my sample is XYZ, then from XYZ how many people should I take in order to carry out this project, that would become sample size. Alright, we'll be trying to understand this sample size thing when we will be doing perhaps second or third lecture. We will be trying to understand that how much sample size is sufficient to carry out any kind of project. Now this is a big deal, making rounds, and it's a big question. Now anyone can come to me and say that okay, what is the sufficient sample size to carry out this kind of a project. Now this is determined statistically, so we will be trying to touch upon to that. So that actually is decided in this stage. Then having decided the sample size in the sample, now suppose that we have data with us, so in that kind of data that we are trying to collect, what type of tools and techniques that we'll be trying to apply, that is also decided, and how do we present our report, or how are we going to present our report. So this entire thing is done at this stage. So essentially, if you can recall whatever we have discussed, just try to bring it into light that up to this stage, everything is on papers. All right, we've just decided that this is how we are going to do it. All right, it is after that the things start. So this is the third stage, is a very important one. So before proceeding on to next stage, if uh, which part of it, Rajat, do you want me to repeat? Distinction between causal and descriptive research, is that you are trying to come to? Okay, so just rerunning through it very quickly. See, when we are talking of descriptive and causal research, uh, see, we have to understand two things. Now, there is something which is cause and effect relationship. Cause and effect relationship would mean that I will just try to explain it with the help of an example. Now, suppose there is this, suppose let's take example of rain. All right. So this reason, or this season, or say previous season, or say previous to previous season, we have a record that how much rain have we visited in specific place. So this is a one data set that we have. So rain in 1990, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010, and suppose I have a data set of how much rain have we visited in the so and so years. Now then I can have another data set which actually talks of crop production. All right, so crop production would mean that in 2001 I have this much of rain and my crop production was this much. In 2005 I have this much of rain and then this much was crop production. I have in 2011 say this much of rain I have witnessed, and then this much of crop production that I have visited. So now these are two things, and if you do a correlation between these two, understand it, then there will be good chances that there will be a positive correlation between these two things. All right, but that positive correlation would not mean, or would not essentially mean, that this crop production is because of the rain. All right, or the rain is because of the crop production. So when you are doing a correlation, which is one of the descriptive tools, it does not have a dependent or independent variable. So you cannot say that the crop was a dependent variable, it was depending on to rain, and because the rains are good, and hence I have a good crop here. So this R, which is a correlation coefficient, which we do in descriptive research, actually does not talk of cause and effect relationships. Maybe the real cause of crop production increasing with year on year is because you are using better pesticides, maybe you are using better techniques, maybe you are doing crop irrigation, maybe you are using scientific methods of doing cropping and all. So there can be many more things. I am not denying the fact that rain is one of the things which actually is contributing to crop production. But when we are doing R, which is correlation coefficient, we do not talk of cause and effect relationship. And when we do not talk of crop and cause and effect relationship, then we are talking of descriptive research. We are just describing the things. Now, suppose, just to give you one more example. Now, there are likely chances that, say, if there is a class of 100 students, you might get a positive correlation between the marks of those students in +2 and their height, suppose. All right, but it does not mean that marks of the student depends on height. So when we are trying to associate two things, not essentially because of cause and effect, but because they are related somehow, all right, then we are talking about descriptive research. But when we are trying to understand that something is because of something, cause and effect relationship, then that would become causal research. So are we on lines? Does that make sense, Rajat? Okay, so this is something then that we were trying to understand of descriptive and causal research. And why do we do this descriptive and causal research thing? Just to give you a practical sense of it, that many a times, specifically in behavioral researches, what happens is something which we are trying to measure is not possible that we can measure it directly. Just to give an example of behavior, which is a simple word, how to measure behavior? It is a very complex phenomenon because your behavior is function of so many things. So you cannot directly measure the behavior. So what do you do is the researchers try to find out from which thing does the behavior associate. Now suppose you say that it is the situation in which someone in, because of this behavior changes, so they will, if situation is something that is easier for me as a researcher to understand, I will rather study situation and then will predict your behavior rather than directly going into the behavior. And that is why this is descriptive thing is there, but I'm not necessarily here talking about the relationship between these two. So this is where it is being used. So more and more as you would go into the literature, you will find out that descriptive research is of major use nowadays. When we are talking of causal research, it basically is a laboratory research that we do, which means that when we are trying to do chemical reactions, or when we are trying to do something which is exactly mathematically correct, then we are trying to do causal research. Whereas in behavioral sciences, nothing is exact, it is not rocket science where E is always equal to MC square. All right, so there are times when doing nothing would give you results, and there are times when doing everything would not give you results. So in those cases, descriptive research is used on a vast scale. So then is data collection. So data collection would mean, now when you have decided everything, you have decided onto which kind of data do you require. Will it be a secondary data? Will it be a primary data? So for both kind of data, you have to decide on what kind of data instruments you will be using and what kind of data collection method you will be using. So in both the cases, you carry out this work of data collection at this stage, which essentially is collecting the data primarily. So going into the field and do the data collection. This is something which is a simple stage to talk of. But at the same time, this is one of those stages which can actually impact the result. So the collection of data has to be very, very minutely done, not something which has to be loosely left over. So once you have this data with you, then you will analyze the data, or before that you have to prepare the data for analysis. Now what do I mean by all that? I mean, any one of you who belongs to engineering background would essentially or would have done maths at some point of time in your school days. You would be remembering something which is normal distribution. All right. So preparing the data is very important. Once you have this data collected to you, you have to prepare it. Why on earth do we need to prepare it? Because that now we are going to apply some tools and techniques which essentially are analysis techniques, and these techniques has some assumptions associated to it. Now suppose there is this correlation thing that we are going to apply. Now if it is a correlation thing, then though I may be sounding a little technical, but just to give you some example, that correlation assumes that both the data sets that you are trying to find out correlation between has to be on metric scale. It cannot be on categorical scale. So suppose the data that you have collected is on a categorical scale, you have to convert it into metric scale, or if it is on a metric scale, you have to convert it into a categorical scale. Though we will be trying to discuss it in our next talks, that converting a data from categorical scale to a metric scale is not possible, but the reverse is possible. So likewise, as we have discussed in the very first part of our talk today, that a lot would depend on what is the problem. So I know the problem, at that point of time only I would decide that I would be requiring this data analysis tool in order to have a solution to this problem. And that tool has some assumptions to it, and I have to prepare my data so that they fulfill those assumptions, and that is very important. So this is all about data preparation. You have to prepare the data for the tools that you are going to apply. All right. So this is data preparation analysis. So if I have to just give you a little bit more peep down view of data preparation, then we would be talking of this thing. So a preliminary plan of data analysis, you will check your questionnaires, you will edit it, you will code it. So when we will do some practical SPSS talks, then we will be understanding this coding, editing. Transcribing the data would mean nothing but to transfer your data from your physical form to the software form to the intangible form. Suppose you are trying to feed up data into SPSS, so you are doing nothing but you are transcribing it. So once you transcribe the data, once you have data in SPSS, then you will be cleaning it up. So cleaning operations are there. A lot of tools and techniques wants the data to be following normal distribution. So you would look for the outliers. If there are some outliers which are disturbing the normality of the data, you will clean them up. You will not make them part of the analysis. So all that is to be done. And the other name that we can give to it would be statistically adjusting the data. So this is something that we do before analysis. So a lot of homework goes behind before sitting onto the analysis desk and doing something wonderful things to your data. So first of all, you have to adjust it, you have to prepare it for the tools and techniques that you're going to apply. So this is data preparation, and once you have prepared it, then you would know the properties of data, and then you would know the properties of statistical techniques, and only then you will analyze the data. Now this step, if you can recall, when we were looking at the overall picture of the 6 steps of data analysis, then we were talking about the 3 important steps, and this was one of them, data analysis. Lot of work has been carried out, and it has been found that these softwares like SPSS or SAS are never going to stop you. They are machines. There is a code which is written, there is an algorithm which is written, so any input you give them, they are bound to give you some output. But it is on to you as a researcher to make sure that if you are subjecting a data to factor analysis, which is one of the techniques, then the data has to fulfill all the requirements of factor analysis. SPSS as a software will not stop you to inject the data to factor analysis, even if it is not addressing the assumption requirements of factor analysis, and it will give you some results also, but the results would not be good. All right, they would be fake results, because factor analysis would bound to give you good results only when its all assumptions are met. So this is where one has to be very careful, and one has to be dexterous in understanding the statistical assumptions of the tools and techniques that one is going to apply. Only then we say that the results that we are trying to understand, or that we are trying to interpret, or that we are going to generalize as such, does has a value. Otherwise, we always will have some results, we always will have an output, but if these things are not taken care of, then they will be outputs but of no use. All right, so everything that you have done till this point, that will be waste. So to understand it more minutely, we will be trying to address this thing of properties of statistical techniques, analyzing the data, in the further classes and further talks that we are going to do. And then last step would be report and presentation. So report and presentation, I do not think that it requires much of the explanation. So that would essentially mean documenting what you have got out of the analysis. So analyzing the data is one thing, but there is a fine line difference between presenting analysis of the data, and interpreting it. So what I as a researcher would be interested in analysis of the data, but you as a general consumer, or you as a general individual, would be interested in interpretation of that analysis. So this interpretation has to be done. All right. So suppose if I've done correlation between 2 data sets, and if I say that R has come out to be 0.9, and I as a researcher do understand correlation of 0.9 is very high, it means these things are associated with each other in this way or that way, but that doesn't make a sense to an outer individual. So for him, I have to tell what does 0.9 mean. So analysis 0.9, interpreting would mean 0.9 is a high correlation, and that means that these 2 data sets on which correlation was applied are associated with each other, or at least they are showing some parallel behavior, which would mean that if one increases, then other also increases. they are showing parallel behavior. That would be the interpretation, but analysis would only be 0.9. But still at the end of it you have to clarify, but still this is not a cause and effect relationship, but they are just showing parallel behaviors. All right, so this is something which is done in reporting. It is a tangible thing that we talk of. Before that everything was done casually, uh, in raw form, but now you will be documenting each and everything. And it is important, so that because when we have started our discussion we've talked about the problem definition, and in problem definition we have talked about one of the important ways of doing it is to look at the previous work that has been done. And when you document your work which you are doing now, that becomes a platform from where other work can be started, and that can actually be taken as help in finding out the problem for some other research project. So this is how we try to approach to the end of this process of conducting research. And this is from me. If you have any questions, then you can ask. So Rajat, I hope that you got it. Vijendra, not able to hear me. Uh, okay. So that is it from my end. Vijendra, I don't know what part of it have you not been able to hear. Uh, if you can just clarify it. So just to tell you the further parts of it. Now this was something from where we've started, so we will try to touch upon some of the statistical part of it. So next time when we will be sitting up, I'll just let you know beforehand, so that you can sit with your computers, and if any one of you have SPSS installed onto your systems, that will be of great help, because we will try to solve on some, and we will try to have first-hand experience of analysis, analytical tools using this SPSS thing. So any one of you, if you have SPSS installed onto your system, that would be of great help. Right? Otherwise, I will do it, and you can have a look at my screen, uh, and I think that will be done. So it is done from my side. Thank you all. Thank you. I am closing up the session now. Thank you. So we'll be meeting tomorrow from 12 to 1.